internet comment section make me lose my faith in humanity, man.
Yeah,
because anybody's and it's just like
all this baseless shit all the time, you know? It's like not even, doesn't even stand up against any scrutiny. Just like these things are somehow overgassed and all that other shit. Okay.
Left to right. Full value. At least on the right hand flag. And on the left hand flag.
Probably should have watched that one a little bit better. Okay.
Well, hello there.
Hello.
So recently I went with Floridaman HVACR to JTAC Range south of Orlando after battling some traffic.
Welcome to another edition of Thunderdome!
It was kind of a, I don't want to say impromptu range day, but we made plans pretty quick and it lined up, so we jumped in and went down to JTAC Range. It was definitely my first time at JTAC Range. Honestly, it's an excellent facility. Everyone there was really cool and laid back. It wasn't your typical public range with a bunch of people that are sketchy. Everyone was really squared away and cool at the same time. It was really refreshing. Definitely not gonna lie, it's a massive drive for me, otherwise I'd go there much more frequently. I'm definitely gonna go back, and on a day that's not so windy, but anyone who can go, I strongly encourage that you go. It is genuinely a great facility that'll give you the opportunity to do a bunch of things you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. I shot exclusively on their 2,000 yard range. During this range trip, the 500 had a class going on, so we weren't able to shoot at the 500, and given the wind conditions, it might have been a little bit better, but they had a class going on and I had an opportunity to stretch out further, and because I did, I learned a lot of stuff. I also really like that they put flags out at multiple distances so you could see the wind calls, because it was absolutely necessary for this trip, and probably in general. I knew range was going to be a factor. There were 3 guns I absolutely wanted to test out at range. I'm very happy that I didn't bring the URGI also and the Geissele SD 14.5. It would have been too much. I brought my HKMR 762 with 60 rounds of 168 federal gold medal match and 10 rounds of Hornady Tap 168 grain ELD match, so those are tipped Match Kings. I brought the MR556 with Black Hill 77 grain TMK as per usual, and my perfectly legal Geissele 11.5 AR pistol with 75 grain Tap 556, and I brought a bunch of 55 grain 556. Floridaman brought his rifle, which I did get to shoot, and I didn't hit the right button for my GoPro, so I didn't get any video. Here's his setup. It's a lot, so I'm gonna try to do this like Ace Ventura.
What you wouldn't read about is how Ray Finkel lost his mind, was committed to a mental hospital only to escape and join the police force under the assumed identity of a missing hiker, manipulating his way to the top in a diabolical scheme to get even with Dan Marino, whom he blamed for the entire thing.
It's a Ballistic Advantage 16-inch mid .625 gas block journal. Has a BCM MCMR 15-inch rail, Surefire dual fuel Scout Pro, Mod Light OKW head, DS00 tail cap with a mod button, a Lunar Concepts hot pocket, rail scales, Carve P hand stop, Proctor sling, BFG U-loop, Geissele mil-spec bolt, government charging handle, 558 EOTech with the primary arms LER magnifier, RRA lower, Geissele lower parts kit, ALG trigger, Magpul trigger guard, Magpul K2 grip, with the A5 buffer tube with the A5 H3 buffer combination, Sprinko green spring, Magpul CTR stock, and a Ford control design sling keep. It's a lot. I gave you that full description so you can figure out how smooth of a shooter it was, and it was. Running it suppressed was wonderful. Very flat shooter, really easy to reach out and touch stuff, even with the EOTech and magnifier. Just really nice, and that primary arms magnifier was pretty clear, I'm gonna be honest with you there. And then I was able to also shoot a chopped FN barrel 12.5 with an A5 system, Surefire Mini2, and a Vortex Razor Gen 3. And the ammo that I put through it was the Mark 318 Motto that I keep in my battle belt, which he had on a Carnicon lower. So the 12.5 guys can rejoice. I did enjoy it, and I like the Mini2. I definitely have to get a Mini2. All right, let's start small and then work up, and then we'll cover all my thoughts on how all of these performed. First, I'm gonna show you the layout of the range. This is a very crude, very crude drawing. We were over here in this area. This was a raised section, and I believe this was raised, but this is the prone section. This isn't quite perfect. This berm was longer than this berm, which you might be able to see in the footage. The wind was very interesting. We had a head-on wind, which you can see and probably hear in some of the shooting footage, and we also had simultaneously a left to right wind. We also had flags here, and there were flags scattered all over the place. I really like this facility because it shows you the way the wind's going, and you can make adjustments on the fly. There was a standing piece of steel that I shot this with at 100 yards. There were some 200 and 300 yard targets. There's a car that I lasered at 320. 400 was what we shot at most of the time. That's the target off to the left. There were some targets at 500, and this was labeled 500, but when I lasered it, it came in at 616, so I'm not sure. But when I lasered the 700, it came back right. So it was 700 to 712 based on whether I hit the target or the berm. And at 400, there was a silhouette and an 8-inch steel circle. And then at 500 or 616, whatever it is. And it might have been 616 across range instead of, if you were over here or in the prone position, it might be a straight shot and then going across diagonally. It gives you a little extra space, I'm not sure. But someone might tell me I'm stupid, and with the conditions, it could have been my laser rangefinder, but it got 400 and the 700 right, and we were directly on with that, so I'm not sure. But this was the 500, which when we get to the MR762, or the 616, whichever it is. I laser it at 616. And that'll play into holds later with the MR762, but we'll come back to this. On the wind, we had, it said between 3 and 15 miles an hour sustained, and 25 mile an hour gusts. So those gusts came at us, and they came this way. I don't know if it was the structure of the range that funneled the wind in towards us, but that's how the wind was. And I've never experienced something where there's a cross wind and a head-on wind value, so it was very weird. It's one thing when you're on a ship at sea, but as far as at a shooting bench, I've either had it coming at me or I've had it, you know, doing something, but I've never, or, you know, diagonal, whatever, based on your geographical position relative to the wind. But that was a lot of wind. And the wind got so bad, in fact, there were times where you couldn't hear any report out of a 5.56 gun that was anything further than 300, because the wind would be coming at you so fast that all you would hear is wind noise. I didn't have my electronic ear protection, and Floridaman did. So between the two of us, we still couldn't discern the hits because of the wind. it was a massive factor. The Steiner P4XI is still great. I could see clearly out to 500 just fine, and honestly I didn't look further than that, which I should have. But 500 and 400 were crystal clear with this little P4XI. I was able to see and positively identify the targets just fine, and the reticle didn't hold me back. I was able to bracket everything just fine, do what I needed to do, send the rounds down, see where they were going, and when I missed, I was able to call those misses. And next time I'm gonna look through the GoPro so y'all can see what the sight picture is at that distance. I kind of messed up there. 100 and 200 is kind of cool, but once you start seeing targets further out, it's much nicer to see what you would actually be expected to positively identify and engage, especially with the size of the reticle in relation to the target. Also with the P4XI, using the reticle, the little stadia lines for this has a BDC. I use Straylock to give me my drops and everything. But using the BDC, I was using the right side of the BDC, so those two posts coming off to represent the shoulder width at that distance. I was using the edge of those to bracket the target and engage at 400. And then 500, I think I only took 1 or 2 shots. I didn't have a lot of ammo for this guy that I wanted to shoot. But holding for wind wasn't bad with this, just using the edge of the BDC for the wind value that we had. All right, this 75 grain tap at 400 yards out of this 11.5 sounded like 55 grain out of the 16-inch. So my original limitation after stretching an 11.5 out to 300 was 400's probably the wall for this, and shooting with the wind and what I was able to do kind of confirmed that. And I know that's pretty much confirmation bias with a preconceived notion that I established, but with 75 grain tap, that's exactly what this thing did. 500 yards with an 11.5 and 75 grain tap was kind of a pipe dream, especially with how the wind was blowing. If I had the 77 grain TMKs, it probably would have got out to 500, but that's the absolute limit, and I'm not hitting very hard when I get that far. So 400 had a really light tink noise, and it was a lot of work to get it out there. So I know there's dudes out in the comments or out in the internet world that's gonna be like, I could take this 11.5 to 600 yards. You are the top 1% of shooters then, or you're full of shit, one of the two. I'm not sure, but it was everything I could do to get hits with 75 grain, and all of the hits I got, some of them I had to visually confirm because I couldn't hear them with the wind. And when you shoot this at 300, it's much more authoritative. 400 was much less, with or without wind. So 11.5 is definitely not where I want to be if I have to shoot further than 400, and 400 is really stretching this thing out in my opinion.
No! This is not how this was supposed to go!
Just based on my experience. And I do plan to continue to do this and develop it and continue to test it, even at 500, maybe even 600 on a calm day next time I go down. But today, any sort of wind at 400 was just making it. So do with that what you will.
So basically, what I was thinking of was, oh fuck, I can't believe you've done this.
I have confidence Henry at 9-hole reviews could do it, but not me. And I could probably do it in perfect conditions, but I don't know. And if it was a 2-way range, this would not inspire confidence. And if you're going up against somebody that has a longer barrel length and you're rocking an 11.5, you can keep the rounds the same. You can say 55-55 or 77-77 or something else, right? But if you have the same exact rounds and someone's got a 16-inch and you have an 11.5, they're going to be able to confidently engage you probably 100 or 200 yards before you can start landing effective shots. So just some food for thought.
Emotional, damn it!
All right, on to the MR556. This stole the show. I let myself, Floridaman, and the 12.5 guy shoot this. All three of us did really well with it. Yes, we were shooting the very best ammo you could shoot out of it, which is the 77 grain TMKs, but super reliable and super accurate. The Accupower was clear from 100 all the way out to 700, but because of the wind, I didn't want to waste any more Black Hills than I did. I shot 50 rounds of Black Hills, which makes my PP soft. But everyone shot it well, and I'm still incredibly happy with this setup. And without the wind, I probably could have pushed this out to 600, maybe 700, but you could tell everything you were hitting. I was very confident between 300 and 500 yards. I'm not sure if I remember if I took a shot at the 616 target with this. I did hit some 500 yard targets pretty well, but again, the wind, that 15 miles sustained and then 25, and then it would die down to 3 miles an hour. It was just crazy wind that day. And I couldn't even imagine if I was shooting down into a valley or shooting across, you know, changing wind conditions in a straight line, going from different points in a valley or something like that. Just the wind really humbled me. And with this rifle, I've had incredible accuracy and results with. It's really difficult to not feel good with this rifle. And even with the wind and even with the hits I was getting, there were still a couple shots where I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to take that in this wind. This rifle also did so well that this was the only rifle that I used to hit this small headshot target at 400. That's that shot where I fired off and went, hey.
Batteries anywhere. I think illumination on scopes is highly overrated. Like when you're in that contrast where you need it, or if you, on 1X, you have to have it. Make that scope take an 1860. Maybe 2025. So some of these guys, it's going to take a lot of. What do? They put bigger batteries on. Yeah. It's like, why are we taking a point battery? Like if you look at the milliamp,
It was a beautiful thing. But I'm incredibly happy with it, and it's going to be the shortest one because it did so well. I really do love this optic, and it's very clear. C-Does was spot on with his review where it's clear from 100 all the way out to 700-800 yards. It's just a super easy optic to use, and I held on the same spot just at the edge of the right-hand side of the mill hashes, and I was able to get my hits and compensate for wind.
It's actually quite nice.
So if the MR556 was the best, then the MR762 did bad? Not necessarily. It was definitely an interesting and humbling experience once again. One of the takeaways is I need to finish this rifle. I need to get the Atlas bipod on there, and I need to get the Modlite OKW on there because it needs it. Maybe a Geissele rail, but absolutely the bipod and the OKW. So this thing absolutely dominated out to 500 yards. Zero issues, cut through the wind, hit authoritatively. You could tell your hits and your misses, and the glass was incredibly clear. I was able to see exactly what I needed to see, and when I missed, I could call it. But the second we got to that 616 yard target, no. The 168 federal gold medal match into 15 to 25 mile an hour headwinds, plus the left to right wind, kept landing my shots around the target. So back to this target here. First you'd hold about here to compensate for wind. There was a little flag over this target. Now I'd already hit on 500 yard steel that was to the left of this target, but tracking to the right. This had a berm, so we said, hey, let's not try to see misses on targets with a void behind it. Let's go to the berm. And I lasered the berm. Again, I don't know if the laser was off or because of the atmospherics or whatever, but this lasered at 616. The guys that work there or have been there or whatever might be like, no, it's 500, you idiot. Or it's only 500 to 550 based on where you are on the range. I don't know. But then notwithstanding, we were shooting here and hitting here. So then we compensate. I put the crosshair right on this line of this post, which I don't like doing because if the wind dies and I hit the post, I'll feel terrible. But we were still hitting over here. And I mean with consistency too. So we were holding 5.5 to 6 mils and landing over here consistently. And then the wind would die and we'd hit here. So we'd chase it back over, wind would pick back up. It got to the point where I was putting my crosshair over here to still hit over here. If there was a target here, it would have been super dead. I would have been great. Then we switched over. I had 5 rounds left of ELD match. I only brought 10. We shot 5. So I took 2 and Floridaman took 3 based on what I said. He wanted to take 2, whatever. We continued to shoot and we both still landed over here. Again, if there was something over here, would have been super dead. But we had to continue to track over here. Now, if we had wind holds in the reticle, would it have helped? Maybe. But the wind was still remarkably inconsistent. So even if I had a little wind dot to make those calls and try to incrementally walk it over, I still think we would have been missing. And what I will say is the ELDs, which are a tipped Match King, were performing very well. In fact, they were performing so well that you had to hold 1 less mil every time you shot it. It was either a half a mil or a full mil value every time you shot the ELD match rounds. So I think I'm gonna start stocking up, even as much as this thing loves 168s. I think I need to start getting 175s and start looking into eating exclusively ramen noodles so I can buy some Black Hills tipped 175s or 168s just to see what I can do, just to help cut through that wind. But we were shooting around that target like Looney Tunes. At 400, it was super easy to see the misses, call the misses, correct and get the hits, and the wind variation didn't seem to be as aggressive at 400, but the second we left 400, everything fell apart. So, does that mean this rifle's bad, or the optics bad, or the combination therein is bad? No. And does it mean the rounds are bad? Not necessarily, but I didn't have enough ammo, I didn't have a bipod, and I wasn't consistent enough to do that. I also was shooting between sitting and on top of that little roof thing, so I needed a much more stable prone shooting position. The takeaways from this are the glass works just fine, trigger's great, rifle's good and very consistent. I just need to do more things to help me get hits at that distance, even if there's wind. Not only in the wind, but regardless, if I take a prone position on a bipod, get set up, I need to be able to make hits and do my job out to 700-800 yards, which is what this is intended for. Saying I'm deadly between 400 and 500 yards with this isn't saying much. And anyone that shoots rifles a lot will be like, yeah, that's really 400 and 500 yards is like the basic level for marksmanship. Going past that, that's when you have to, you start becoming a better shooter. But if I gave this rifle to Henry at 9-hole reviews and gave him the proper ammunition, he would do incredible stuff with it. Probably even the federal gold medal match, which I don't have an issue with. It's just on this day with the variable wind conditions, it was a struggle fest. But I hit the target. I hit the 500-yard targets, the 500 or 600, whatever. I hit them twice for 12 shots, which is unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable marksmanship.
Unacceptable!
I also shot a 12.5, which was a chopped FN. I shot it just a little bit. The guy let me shoot some 318 through it, and I shot it at 300 yards. I got a couple hits, felt pretty good about it. Gun shoots great. I want a Mini2 for my 14.5s. I'm not gonna say that the Mini2 on a 12.5 is bad. It's just not hearing safe, but it'll do its job. It has a nice deep tone, but that's not a hearing safe deep tone. Also, Floridaman's rifle shooting 55 grain had the same report at 55. So 16-inch with a suppressor at 400 had the same effect as my 11.5 shooting 75 grain. Had I shot 75 grain through the 16-inch, I think it would very easily, his setup is very capable, especially with the ALG trigger and all that stuff, of going out to 5, maybe even 600 yards. But 55 grain, it didn't really have the ass to get out there. And then in the wind too, it was just not a good equation. And I know there's 55 grain guys out there, but yeah, if you were out there, you would have saw it, and I think you would have had the same trouble. So my main takeaways from this range trip are, and other than the much deeper respect I have for Henry at 9-hole reviews, his marksmanship is even more incredible because he makes quick wind adjustments on the fly and gets hits. I don't know how he does that shit with 55 grain, And even in his videos, when he goes out to the 500 yard target with 55 grain, it's up to the spotter to see it because it's not really having a report. Your best 55 grain warrior versus an average 77 grain is just not going to do it. And Henry, also shooting 77 grain, realizes that it's a much better round and a much better setup. So whatever. All right. I have like 12 takeaways. I'm going to try to blaze through them and wrap this up. I'm sure it's been long. The first one, and this is a no shit Sherlock, but having it on the range and having to deal with the wind conditions, clear quality glass optics do wonders. All of my optics that I brought performed perfectly. The P4XI, the Trijicon Accupower 1:8 red mill, and this Steiner T5XI 3:15 gave me the glass that I needed to see crystal clear, hit those engagements, and see my misses as well. I couldn't have done that without those optics that day. Next, wind holds are definitely nice to have. So I didn't have any wind holds in my optics. I didn't bring my razor, and they would have been nice to have. It's another tool to help you with wind conditions. Is it necessary? No, I may do without it, but having a reference point, a solid reference point in a mill reticle is better in my opinion. BDCs, I don't know. It'll give you a reference point, but I don't know if it's going to be where you want it to be versus the mill. Wind, especially 15 to 25, does not care about you and will disrespect whatever you're trying to accomplish.
Disrespect your surroundings.
Next, you must plan for wind. Must. I don't care what you think you can do, what you can do in perfect conditions. Full value wind at anything over 300 yards will have serious effect on what you're trying to do downrange. So you might think you have the best shit hits the fan scenario set up or any of this other crap that you want to prepare for, but if you're not taking into account wind and how to shoot in wind, you're going to end up flat on your face, just like I did. 55 grain is, for me, out of contention for serious use. Again, planning for wind, I don't know if 55 is what I ever want to have in my rifle. Maybe in a 20 inch when you can send it down, you know, screaming fast, but the wind is still going to have its way with it, man. All sorts of non-consensual intercourse as it flies to the target. So just something to think about. And at 400 yards out of a 16 inch with the wind, it was very weak. I don't have confidence that in that wind that we shot in, that we'd be able to go out to 500 reliably, get effective hits on target and drop targets. And if I have to use 55 grain, I'll make do, but oh man, it was not a good time. My 11.5 with premium ammo is a 400 yard gun, period, bar none. I do not want to take shots past 400 yards. I don't think I will be lethal past 400 yards. I know there's probably super duper special operators or lying ass influencers that are going to say, no, I can get hits out to 800 with my 11.5 and 55 grain. The Mountains Mullets America guy does impressive stuff. He is a phenomenal marksman. He and Henry right now are my top two marksmen that I look to on YouTube. I know there's other excellent marksmen out there. Tiberosaurus Rex at Rex Reviews is a phenomenal marksman. All right, they exist. I can't do it. And putting a 4 to 16 Night Force on top of an 11.5 to see what it can do possibly versus being combat effective or whatever you want to say, being effective on target for the average shooter is not realistic. So for me, an 11.5 with the Steiner 1-4 or even a 1-6 is a 400 yard gun with premium 75 grain or 77 grain ammunition. I might be able to get 450, maybe 500 on a perfect day with 77 grain TMK, but I'm not willing to take, especially with these ammo conditions and everything being out of stock, I'm not willing to take the 77 grain out of my HKMR 5.56 and put it in an 11.5 so I can just get another 50 yards out of it. It's not worth it. I'll keep it in the MR 5.56 and shoot it out of that and get another 100 or 200 yards out of it. You know what I'm saying? I'd much rather use it as a Mark 12 replacement and get my hits with good velocity and good effect on target than say, let me try to make this 11.5 work. All right, next point. I need TMKs in all my combat loads in 5.56 and 7.62 by 51 or 308. they are so much more stable in the wind to the point where it takes full values or half values out of your reticle when you're holding for wind. And they slice through the air so much better. Again, I know it's going to be a no shit Sherlock kind of moment for everyone in the comments or the experienced shooters. And I know they're also going to say good luck bankrupting yourself stocking that ammo. But I think having like 3 or 4 combat loads of TMKs and then a practice pool of ammunition, yeah, I can't have 10,000 rounds of 77 grain TMK Black Hills in the basement, but you know, I'd rather have 2,500, 3,000 rounds of TMK than 10,000 rounds of 55 grain. So that's just where I'm at on that. And that may not sit right with some people. They might think I'm retarded for that. It is what it is, but especially after this range day, I'd much rather have the effective ammo and train with less trigger presses but more effective than, because of where I'm at in my training and development and everything, than 10,000 rounds of 55 grain just shooting it downrange.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Next, the idea of battlefield pickup ammo isn't that great unless that's what you're zeroed for. And that was from shooting the 12.5 with the 318. I got 1 or 2 hits out of the 4 or 5 rounds I sent. 3 to 5 rounds, I don't recall. I did not get that many hits. And that's not what the guy was zeroed for. He wasn't zeroed for 62 grain Mark 318, right? And I don't expect him to be. It's hard to get. So shooting that gun, feeling the impulse with that ammo, it's the same as like a SBR load from TAP. It's about that same powder charge. It's got that same level of oomph. But that whole thing where, oh, I'm zeroed for 62 grain, but if I'm gonna be out and shit hits the fan and people drop 55 grain, then I'm gonna shoot. Like, you might be able to make some quick adjustments on your optic or whatever, but the whole idea of battlefield pickup ammo and just throwing it in your rifle and going to work is not viable. And that's also a no shit moment, but there's some people with that preconceived notion that, oh, let me just throw this in there. And it might be a dire circumstance, it might be within 100 yards, but I don't know, man. You are your own supply. That's what I'm gonna continue to drill. You are your own supply. And zero your fucking optics. Next, I need a shooting bag. And like I said earlier, my MR762 needs an Atlas bipod and an OKW on it. The shooting bag, the guy with the 12.5 had a shooting bag, and it made the entire experience easier, especially on the roof. That little roof peak they have is... it's not easy to get on top of. He actually had a really good... I'm trying not to put this dude up on YouTube because I didn't ask him anything. So I'll just do a shot behind him without his face, but super cool dude. Let me shoot his stuff. I let him shoot my stuff, but he had a very smart way of tackling that roof, and that shooting bag made it so much easier. So I definitely need one. They're like $100 and something, but it's absolutely worth it. And transitioning, my next point, 12.5s are nice, and I need a Mini2. And I still, like I said earlier, the 12.5 with the Mini2, the tone was nice, but it wasn't hearing safe. And we were also under a roof, so I'm sure, you know, past the roof, on grass, perfect conditions, it might be tolerable and definitely better than an unsuppressed gunshot, but I don't know. I would like it on a 14.5, I think. My last 2 points. If that day's shooting conditions were a battle, I would be dead right now. If there was a marksman that was capable of overcoming the wind conditions and engaging me even 50 yards further than I could engage them, I would be dead. So that's a very critical piece and something to take away. And that means I need to get better as a shooter, and I need to make sure that I adapt the rounds I'm using with the equipment that I have to be as successful as possible.
Figured out. You figured out. You figured out. Figured out.
I'm not here making excuses. I'm saying I failed to achieve the marksmanship standards that I set out to on that day. I need to train more. I need to load better ammo, and I need to adapt for all conditions. And this MR762 needs to get finished. Those are my priorities. And lastly, if you don't like my conclusions, that's fine. Go prove me wrong. I'm not a phenomenal shooter. Remarkably average. So if this hurts you personally, go out there and show me what I need to do better. and not at a 100-yard range, go to JTAC or go to another 2,000-yard range and show me what I did wrong. Prove to me that you can do better in the same conditions or in ideal conditions or whatever. Document your conditions. Lay it out, go shoot it. Don't tell me how to fix it, show me. And I'm not saying that like people can't do it. I already know Henry can do it. I already know Rex Reviews can do it. And I already know Mullets Mountains America can do it. There's guys out there that can outshoot me all day long. But for me, an average shooter, I need to minimize as many variables as possible, which I was not able to minimize as many as I needed to yesterday to be effective. So that's my point with all this. This was a great experience at a great facility. Once again, they had no idea I was there. I'm not like, hey, I'm this person. I'm super awesome. I just go places and do stuff. And I let some people shoot my guns. It was a really cool experience. I'd rather it just be a cool experience. So they didn't know I was going. They don't give a fuck about me. I've interacted with Barrel and Hatchet and Wise Men Company maybe once or twice in comments on YouTube. They don't know me. They don't owe me shit. They were cool to me while I was there. So I've got zero problems going back to that range. It was a great experience, great facility, and it can really help you polish your skills. I don't care what you think your engagements are. I think you should go there and train to the 500-yard standard, to the 600-yard, 700-yard, whatever equipment you have, take it to its limits and push past your limits so you can be successful in whatever situation you find yourself in. I don't care if you live in a tiny, tight-ass urban environment or you live in mega city, 12 or some shit like Judge Dredd. If you're only going to do CQC shit, great, but develop other skills. And that way you won't be caught off guard and you'll be more well-rounded shooter. That's what I learned today. The wind will disrespect anything you're trying to do. So do not write out atmospheric conditions, storms, wind, all that other shit, because when you do that, you'll get caught in it and you'll get snapped up. So great lesson. I'm not upset that I shot that ammo in those conditions and failed. I'm upset that I need to do better and I'm not at that level yet and I'm hungry to improve. That's what I'm upset at, that I let myself down. So I got to develop those skills. Definitely check out JTAC Range. They don't know who the fuck I am. And I had a great time. And it was a good time to shoot with the guys I shot with. Just wonderful experience. So, as always, thanks for watching. Take care out there. By the way, not that anyone's going to stay this long, but this is my rangefinder. It's a Bushnell Elite 1 mile arc. So if you want reference, it's a 7X or 7.5X, whatever it is. 7 by 26. So that's what I was using.